is Alice in Muggerland, with the man who would be Hufflepuff, Bilious McDaniels, and Alice, the mudblood who joined the Hogwarts Express.
Hey, Alice.
What, Bill?
I have another question from another wizarding type that they need a no-maj expert. And as you are a no-maj, you are an expert in no-maj things.
I can't argue with your logic.
All right. Even though you can argue with me about Quidditch, but my logic is sound. Great. Okay, so this is from Department of Experimental Charms, Larry Lebowski. Why is my refrigerator running? I thought they were supposed to stay still.
Well, if your refrigerator's running, you should probably go catch it.
But are they supposed to stay still?
Yeah, typically that's a joke because they usually don't actually run around. They just stay in the kitchen in one spot.
I think he actually means a running refrigerator.
Like literally running
Literally.
around. Yeah. I don't know why his refrigerator would be doing that, but I gotta say that really sounds like a magic thing, not a no match thing. I think that's a wizarding problem right there. Just based on my limited experience of the wizarding world, that definitely does not sound like a no match problem.
Well, we're not going to be dealing with no match problems as we continue on with chapter 12. It is Christmas at Hogwarts for the chapter called The Mirror of Erised.
I was wondering how I was supposed to say that. Erised?
Erised, yes.
Erised. Okay, cool. Let's start.
As I mentioned, they basically went from Halloween to Christmas, and
right.
It starts off as with the Golden Trio talking to Hagrid about Nicholas Flamel.
I'm sorry, the Golden who?
The Golden Trio. That's a nickname that wizards have for Harry, Hermione, and Ron.
Ah, why golden?
You never heard of like the Golden Child?
Oh, okay. So the Golden Trio.
Yep.
We get into the thing with Hagrid. We finished the last chapter with them talking to Hagrid, finding out about the name Nicholas Flamel, which has quite a bit of consequences for this chapter. We start off with them at Hogwarts, which is apparently very poorly insulated because some of the rooms are nice and warm if they have fireplaces, but lots of the school is very cold, especially down in the dungeons where they're taking potions with Professor Snape. Malfoy he's continuing to be a Slytherin, picking on Harry about the fact that Harry is not going to go home for Christmas. He's going to stay there at Hogwarts. This is an interesting thing for him to pick on Harry about because Harry is actually very pleased to be staying at Hogwarts. He thinks this is going to be his best Christmas ever. And with good reason.
Well, with the type of family the Dursleys are, I can understand his thought pattern with that. It does start off with the three of them going through, mentioning to Hagrid that they've been going into the library a lot to look up, trying to find Nicholas Flamel.
I don't know about your copy of the book, but my copy actually starts with them talking about what Hogwarts is like at Christmas time, and then starts with a confrontation following a potions class in the dungeons.
Malfoy, his joke about Harry being replaced by a wide-mouthed tree frog, has basically fell on deaf ears.
Right, because he's making fun of the fact that Harry had caught the snitch in his mouth in the big Quidditch match where Gryffindor defeated Slytherin. And the fact is, everybody is much more impressed with the fact that he didn't fall off his broom, which had been enchanted and was trying to buck him. I can imagine that Malfoy is just going to continue to be more and more frustrated as Harry comes into his own and proving that he is a golden child, as you might say, by being the star Quidditch player, and I'm sure the star of many other adventures as the series continues. So, Malfoy is jealous. That's not a surprise. certainly there have been a lot of villains over the centuries of literature that were really nothing more than just jealous. Malfoy seems like he's falling into that camp. However, Harry, again, isn't too offended about having jokes about his family or the fact that he doesn't have a family to go back to, because he's just thrilled to get to stay at Hogwarts, specifically because the Weasleys are staying at Hogwarts. Which, that seems pretty notable here, because I have a feeling if the Weasleys were going home, they would have invited Harry to go with them. And that's kind of borne out in what we read later on in this chapter. But I want to get back to what you were talking about, because as far as overarching plot is concerned, where that gets pushed forward is the fact that the trio have been spending their free time in the library looking for more information on the name Nicholas Flamel, which is the name that Hagrid dropped at the very end of the previous chapter as having something to do with the package that Hagrid had procured from the bank and brought to Hogwarts and is now being guarded by a large dog named Fluffy. So the kids, as I'll call them, have been spending their free time searching the library in a rather inefficient manner, looking for any and all references to Nicholas Flamel. They have yet to find any in the library.
And if you think about how they're searching the library, it really does fall, and as you'll find out later in chapters, how these three really are. First, you have Hermione, who has a list of books that she wants to go through to try to check, already prepared with what she wants to do. You have Ron haphazardly just pulling books off the shelves to look through. And you have Harry walking over to the restricted section, wondering if that's the right place.
And I'd like to talk about that just for a second, because what we haven't seen very much from Harry yet, but that I suspect we are starting to see and we'll probably see more of, is, he has that conversation way back with the hat. And the hat suggests that he might belong in Slytherin. And this chapter, we start to see more behavior where maybe he does have some of the Slytherin in him, so to speak, because he is drawn, as you point out, to the restricted section, the section that he shouldn't be going into. And that's the section he thinks the information is going to be in. I think that's kind of interesting, makes him a more interesting character.
Well, one thing about being a Gryffindor, from what I understand, is also while they are noble and chivalrous and things like that, sometimes they are brash to the point of being foolhardy.
I beg your pardon.
It's true. Like, we'll get into this later on, but there's certain aspects of being a Gryffindor that they do things because it's cool, not because it's right.
I think you're just jealous that you're not a Gryffindor.
I'm perfectly fine with my Horned Serpent house. However, what I'm saying is, it's not that the trait of Harry. I see where you're getting at, that it might be a Slytherin quality, but it's also one of the negative aspects of a Gryffindor. For example, one of the negative aspects of Horned Serpent is that sometimes we're accused of not having a sense of humor.
You're also sometimes accused of not having any friends. But moving on. They're searching the library in their respective manners, as you've pointed out. Hermione is going about it in a sort of scientific method. Ron, who I have a particular affinity with, is going sort of as a haphazard, randomly picking books to search through. And meanwhile, Harry is drawn to the dark side. However, the very stern librarian who we meet in this chapter is having none of that and shoos him out of the restricted area. Well, not for long.
Yes, Madam Pince.
Because he'll be back. But not for a little while. We get to the holiday starting. Hermione has gone off to visit with her parents, who are both dentists. And there's a funny little exchange here where they suggest that she ask her parents, and that it would be safe to ask them. It seems like, yes, it would be safe to ask her parents who Nicholas Flamel is, but there is very little chance that they'll have any idea who he is because they're dentists. And just as another reminder that she is Muggle-born, whereas if Weasley were going home to talk to his parents, well, they may or may not be willing to answer the question, but they might know exactly who he'd be talking about if he asked who Flamel was. Interesting.
I always thought it would be hilarious if she went to ask about her parents about Nicholas Flamel, and they're like, "Oh yes, he comes into the office once every 2 months to get crowns replaced."
Yeah. Yeah, if they know who Nicholas Flamel is, it'll be because he has some sort of interesting dental issues. Moving on. So apparently Ron and Harry are really enjoying having Hogwarts mostly to themselves. Describes hanging out in their dormitory and getting the good armchairs by the fire in the common room, and how they're eating a lot and playing many rounds of wizard chess, which apparently is very much like Muggle or no-match chess, except that you actually have to negotiate with the pieces to get them to move the way you want. Ron is playing once again with his hand-me-down set, and as it says, like everything else he owned once belonged to someone else in his family. Turns out that that's not perfectly true, as we'll find out shortly when he starts opening his Christmas presents. He has been playing with this set for so long that they're very happy to comply with what he wants, whereas Harry is having a bit of trouble convincing the chessmen that Seamus loaned him to do what he wants. So I'm heartily amused by the idea of the chess pieces arguing back with the player. Certainly, I think when I'm playing cards that, it would be helpful if occasionally, the King of Hearts would look up at me and say, "Don't play me now." Just saying. On Christmas Eve, Harry goes to bed. He's not really sure what to expect in the morning as far as gifts are concerned, but he is not disappointed when he wakes up, because there are actually a small pile of packages on the foot of his bed. Not as many as Ron got, which surprised me a little bit, because we keep being told, but in part by Malfoy, so you have to consider the source, that Ron's family is very poor and can't afford anything. So it was a pleasant surprise that Ron got a decent haul for Christmas. Probably not as good as Hermione's from her dentist parents, but we don't find out in this chapter what she got for Christmas.
Well, you also have to think about it this way in regards to Ron and his presents pile. Now, if the Weasley children are also giving presents, that's going to increase Ron's overall pile on top of everything.
That's true.
Now, I know what was like with my Christmases, that, yeah, we seem to have gotten a lot of presents, but when you have a bunch of kids in your family, you actually have to give each other gifts, because if you don't, your parents get ticked off. It all adds up to a larger pile, so to speak.
Do you have any siblings, Bill?
Yes, I do.
Did you have to give them gifts?
When you have to give 11 other siblings gifts, yes.
You have 11 siblings?
Yes.
And you're not friends with any of them? That's sad.
No, I am actually friends with all of them. But when you are basically like a 15-year-old, you have to try to figure out how to get gifts to 11 other kids. It kind of gets a little bit stretched, so to speak.
I think Hermione has the gift-giving thing down. She gave Harry chocolate frogs, which who wouldn't like that? So,
and she gave Ron Bertie Bott's every flavor beans.
Yeah, that's not a very nice gift.
You would think that as a daughter of dentist, she would have sent something more, I don't know, sugar-free.
Yeah, actually, I think the dentists are trying to drum up more business. She's going to give all of her friends candy for every present. Just saying. Harry also got a hand-knit sweater from the Weasley mother. And apparently this is a thing, Weasley sweaters. So not everything is a hand-me-down. There are also handmade sweaters. And apparently Ron's is always maroon, and he doesn't like the color maroon. I kind of feel sorry for him that his mom keeps making him sweaters in a color that he doesn't like. But these are not the point of our conversation so far. Really hasn't gotten to the important present that Harry gets, and that is the cloak of invisibility, or an invisibility cloak. Which is the preferred?
Either one's fine.
And as it is described, it is a shining silvery cloth. It is strange to the touch, like water woven into material. Actually sounds really cool. I have to admit, I would like to have an invisibility cloak. Not sure what I would do with it, but it just sounds really neat. And this is from an anonymous source who included a note that this once belonged to his father, and it was time to return it to Harry. So we don't know who it's from. Very mysterious. Harry's a little bothered by that. He doesn't have long to think about it because the Weasleys come bounding in and they're all comparing sweaters, etc., etc. As one of them puts it, it's a time for family. And what I like about that is that they immediately include Harry in that. So Harry has basically found his family there at Hogwarts in the form of the Weasley clan. Pretty cool. And then there's the Christmas dinner description, which just sounds fantastic, with roast turkeys and potatoes and buttered peas and something called wizard crackers, which just sound amazing. So am I picturing this right? It's kind of like a rolled tube that's covered in colorful paper, and you burst it open and it kind of explodes and there's gifts and stuff inside. Is that really what we're talking about here?
That's exactly what they're talking about.
Okay. Because it's not really something that we do much of in the US, but I thought I had, heard of crackers like this elsewhere.
Yeah, there's something that's something that wizarding people do a lot during the Christmas times, because it's an easy way to give gifts at parties, because basically you could go off and just buy a bunch of random wizard crackers and things just come out of them that at random.
Oh.
So you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry about, if you have like a big gathering, you have to worry about actually thinking about individual people. They get what they get.
Is that what you would give to your siblings at Christmas? All 11 of them?
No, because I was supposed to actually give them regular gifts to open.
Okay.
Now, as an adult, I'd still have to give them regular gifts to open.
I see. Do they all give you gifts?
Yes.
So what's something that you would want for Christmas?
I actually don't usually think about what I want for Christmas, because I'm horrible to shop for.
Mm-hmm.
I just let them buy me what they want to get, and I either enjoy it or I don't.
So what do you usually get for Christmas?
What do I usually get? It can range anything from candies to clothing to tickets to Quidditch matches. It all depends on how they go about with the gifts in general. Sometimes my brothers will go through and combine their own resources to try to get me like good seats to a Quidditch match or something like that, or I do a lot of traveling usually with the Mac USA. So what they usually will do is they'll get me like little things I can use for travel.
So what constitutes a good seat at a Quidditch match?
The highest box that you could be in, as close to the front as possible.
Okay. Just curious. So, Dumbledore, we see him again. He has stayed at Hogwarts, and he has swapped out his wizard's hat for a flowered bonnet that probably came out of one of these crackers. Everybody's drinking and making merry, including Hagrid, who apparently keeps calling for more wine until he finally kisses Professor McGonagall on the cheek, and she giggles and blushes. I love that. When Harry finally leaves the table, he's got a whole bunch of stuff that he's gotten out of these crackers, but he really is distracted by the thought of this invisibility cloak. And so he, at his first opportunity, Ron falls asleep almost immediately, and Harry dons the cloak and goes off, and he is in search of the restricted book area. So that is how we get back to the restricted books. When he finally gets around to opening one of them, it screams, which is a pretty terrifying thought, a book that screams.
Been there, done that.
Really?
Yes.
Do you have a book that screams?
You gotta you wind up getting a lot of screaming books when you're studying Defense Against the Dark Arts.
Ah, okay. Good to know. This is obviously very disconcerting for Harry, who, shoves the book back into place and runs off in the cloak. Filch is around, basically comes in a hurry when he hears the screaming book, and then goes and reports to Snape that somebody has been in the restricted book area. So this is an area that they are clearly monitoring very closely. It's pretty safe to assume that they have noticed the unusual activity with the Golden Trio in the library if they're monitoring this area. Or maybe it is very specifically the restricted book area, but I have a feeling Snape knows what's going on pretty much all over Hogwarts all the time. So Harry steps into a room to sort of avoid detection by Snape and Filch. And this is where he makes a really fascinating discovery, and it really becomes the meat of the chapter. And that is, of course, the title, The Mirror of Erised. He steps in front of the mirror, and he's initially very frightened, even more frightened supposedly than when the book screamed, though I have a hard time imagining anything more disconcerting than that, because when he looks into the mirror, there's a whole bunch of people there, including people who he quickly realizes are his parents. He is seeing his family. He's not seeing people that are also invisible in the same room with him. But there's still a question of why this mirror shows him his family. When he brings Ron back, Ron doesn't see Harry's family. In fact, when Ron stands in front of the mirror, what he sees is himself, but sort of an elevated version of himself where he has become, he's becoming the head boy at Hogwarts and captain of the Quidditch team. This is Ron as he would like to be. It's very interesting that for Harry, he's seen his family. For Ron, he's seen himself. That gets us into very interesting discussion area, I think, which is about magic mirrors in literature, because there have been an awful lot of them. Probably the most famous one is none other than Alice's looking glass that she steps through. And I have to admit that when I was a kid, I used to spend lots of time staring into mirrors and wondering about the world on the other side of the mirror. And so it seemed very natural to me the first time I read Through the Looking Glass to imagine that you could step through the mirror and enter this world where everything's the same except a little bit backwards.
And they actually kind of hinted at that with Harry's first look into the mirror. Like he wanted to fall through the mirror to be with his family.
Yeah, he's obviously, once he realizes who he's looking at, he's very drawn to the people in the mirror, which makes sense. I mean, he hasn't known his family at all. Other magic mirrors, I think it was George MacDonald who wrote that all mirrors are magic mirrors, but other famous magic mirrors in literature are, of course, the evil queen's mirror in Snow White. Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of them all? When you look into the mirror, I'm sure the answer is Bill. There's the mirror in Beauty and the Beast. There's the mirror that I want to talk about because it comes out as being very close to what this mirror is. Maybe the first mention of a magic mirror, but would be in a reflecting pool in the Legend of Narcissus. And he wastes away looking at his own reflection in this mirror because he's so in love with himself. So that gets us to a conversation that Harry has several nights later when he stumbles back into this room, and Dumbledore says not only that he's seen Harry there, but he's known that Harry's been back to this mirror several times, and that he's going to move it away because people have wasted away looking into this mirror because this mirror shows you your heart's true desire. And I think that's a very beautiful but also a very sad thing. So in Harry's case, his heart's true desire is his family because he's never had a family or felt like a part of a family. And in Ron's case, his heart's true desire is to eclipse his family because he's come in this long line of Weasleys and he wants to prove that he is as good or better than the rest of them. It's very bittersweet.
Well, it's I've had talks about this with one of my younger brothers too, because it really boils down to that if you're so low on the totem pole in regards to age that there's usually nothing that you have done that someone else hasn't done already. And he wants to be able to not eclipse them, but actually have a reason of standing out. And the way that Ron, I believe, would see it is that basically he has to do everything ever in Hogwarts.
Okay. You were a middle child, though, weren't you?
I was the oldest.
I'm not sure I believe that.
Trust me, you don't want to be the oldest sibling with 11 siblings under you. So
No, I don't. Harry's, heart's desire is his family in this story, where he is getting things that would be the heart's desire of many people. He has wealth. He has power that is as of yet, mostly untapped. He has innate athletic ability at a sport that doesn't exist. And, that creates a lot of jealousy among Malfoy and probably other students too. Even though he has these things, what his real heart's desire is his family. And that kind of goes back to this, again, the beginning of this, the gift that he gets on Christmas, I think, really is this inclusion as part of the Weasley clan. That's really the thing that is going to mean the most to him, I suspect, in the long run. But the cloak of invisibility is pretty cool too. Meanwhile, Ron, it remains to be seen what Ron's going to accomplish. But the fact that he's known as part of the Golden Trio suggests that he's going to accomplish a lot in his own right. So we'll just have to wait and see. Dumbledore, for his sake, says that the mirror is going to be moved so that Harry doesn't waste away staring into it. Again, very reminiscent of the Narcissus legend. When he's asked what he sees when he looks in the mirror, he says he sees socks, which I'm pretty sure is not true. But even Harry picks up on the fact that was a very personal question. So when you guys are dating in the wizarding world, is that like one of those questions that you ask to get to know each other? What do you see when you look into the mirror of Erised? Or what would you see?
to be quite honest, most wizards don't know that the Mirror of Erised exists because they've never actually stumbled upon it.
But they've all read
So it wouldn't
this.
be-
They've all read this historical text, right?
Not everybody reads. You should know that.
I-
Some people
not
don't
every-
care about some people don't care about history. Sometimes all they care about is making page 6 of the Dragget Post. I don't
Excuse me,
get that.
Well, what is a Dragget Post?
I believe it's the equivalent of the Nomad Wall Street Journal.
I see. What's on page 6?
Usually pictures and things of that nature.
Pictures.
Yes.
Okay.
It's kind of like the celebrity section, Wizard Celebrity.
I see. Are you a celebrity in the wizarding world?
I am not.
Is that why you don't have any friends?
Again, I have friends.
Okay, back to mirrors.
Yes, back to mirrors.
So this chapter basically it revolves around two themes that we see a lot in other stories. We have a theme we have a magic mirror. Again, as we've discussed, this is a theme that is in a lot of stories, and these mirrors serve different functions. And we also have the idea of your heart's true desire, which is to paraphrase another story, a tale as old as time. Interesting to think what each of these characters would see, when they look into that mirror. Interesting to think about what you would see when you look into that mirror. And I think that this would actually be a really good, first date question for your wizarding world. So you should consider adding it, maybe have it be do you have BuzzFeed? It should be a quiz.
What's BuzzFeed?
Right. Anyway, that's all I got about this chapter. Anything to add?
I'm supposed to be the one to ask anything to add.
Well, I've been talking a lot.
I don't have anything in particular to add to this chapter. I was surprised that you didn't bring up, since you enjoy the talks about the feast, that Percy almost broke his teeth with biting into a silver sickle that was in his Christmas pudding. Also, one of the gifts that Harry got, a couple of gifts that Harry got that we didn't even mention. Hagrid went through and made him a flute that sounded a little bit like an owl, and
That's true.
basically Harry re-gifted one of his gifts of the 50 pence piece that he received from the Dursleys, and he gave it to Ron.
Right, yeah, I did want to mention that. So we have the 50-cent piece from the Dursleys, which honestly I was surprised they sent him anything at all. So I feel like that was a pretty good gift. And Ron had apparently never seen Muggle money before.
And Ron thought it looked weird, and Harry's like, "Here you go, you can have this. This is how much the Dursleys mean to me. I'm just gonna give away their gifts." Now, you got to think about it this way: if the Dursleys actually treated Harry like a son, do you think that he'd have the same type of reaction to the Mirror of Erised?
Probably not. And clearly, this is a big hole that he feels in his life. Like I said before, he's never felt like he was part of a family or wanted in a group like that, and that's why I think the Weasleys accepting him the way they have is going to be very, very influential on him in the stories to come. For this chapter, I will say that my favorite character is Dumbledore. So I think that his character has been a looming presence throughout this book, starting at the very beginning. But he's starting to take shape more and more and be more well defined. And it's interesting to wonder how much he knows about everything that's going on in Hogwarts. I earlier mentioned that it seems like Snape knows everything that's going on. I have a feeling Dumbledore knows everything that's going on too. And so his awareness of what Harry has been sneaking off to do at night to look into this mirror, it says something interesting about him. It also says something interesting that he really desires a pair of socks, apparently.
Well, socks keep your feet warm.
They do indeed.
And
something we can agree about.
And as you mentioned, it doesn't seem like Hogwarts is very well insulated. So,
no, very, very cold and chilly there.
That being said, folks, next week again we will be talking about Nicholas Flamel. Until then, Knox. Oh yeah, I was looking at something else. I was going a little bit further ahead.
Yeah, a little bit further ahead. They talked to Hagrid about going to the library a lot. Do you want to try that over?
No, that's fine.